Welcome to Proles of the Round Table.
So the next topic I'll move on to is the Ludlow massacre. Now, quick backstory, CF&I, which is a Colorado Fuel and Iron, was a major player in the U.S. market, and it was the number one employer in Colorado. It was the largest...
Like Walmart.
Yes. It was also the largest private landowner in Colorado. So it became a massive organization. And because they were already hated workers, unions, all of it, they made a point of increasing diversity in their organization by recruiting from as many different countries as they could, because they felt like if they could get enough people that spoke different languages together, they wouldn't be able to organize because they wouldn't be able to communicate with each other.
Yikes.
Right? So
that's what we do now. Like there's an entire organization built around flying to other countries, hiring people from, say, Jamaica, Costa Rica, the Philippines, flying them here to Colorado. The Broadmoor is one of the major employers of these people.
Yeah.
There was a job posted recently for the Broadmoor. They pay these people nearly $80,000 a year to go and find people that they can pay less than minimum wage. And by that, I mean they pay the minimum wage. However, they have to pay back the plane tickets and their room and board for staying on the property of the Broadmoor, which of course then drives down the wages for the rest of the Broadmoor workers, and also drives down the wages of everybody else in Colorado Springs. So that tactic still
happening.
Still going on.
Fucking
anyway,
shit.
That explains so much. I was wondering why I ran a call there once, and there was a British lady who like took us to like the room where there was like this drunk kid, but yeah, I was wondering like why is there this random British person in Colorado? It's always weird. Like it always throws you off.
There was a friend of mine that I worked with when I worked for a major cable corporation that is based here in Colorado Springs. She had a husband who began sort of entry level in the kitchens and got promoted to head pastry chef in one of their smaller restaurants, and he got paid $12 an hour, which was less than she and I made as an entry-level employee at Comcast. And I was like, how is that even possible? This is a head pastry chef at a hotel that makes, and I'm not kidding, tens of millions of dollars a year. It is a high, right? We're not talking about Holiday Inn. The Broadmoor, for those of you listening outside of Colorado, the Broadmoor is, if not, maybe behind the Antlers, the most expensive hotel in Colorado Springs.
Basically like the Ritz.
It's where the Koch brothers hold their annual conferences. It is a multi-million dollars per year.
Wasn't there an ALEC conference there at one point?
There was an ALEC conference there, but we are getting way the hell off topic. Let's get back to the labor
Let's bring it back to Colorado labor wars.
Okay.
All right. So they were recruiting people from all around the world so that they couldn't communicate with each other to work these mines, but mining is a dirty job, and so it would be difficult for them to keep the workers down for long. So they forced overtime. This is long before overtime pay was a guarantee. There were lots of explosions. There's black lung. There's rock falls. In 1910 alone, more than 400 miners died on the job in Colorado.
Just in Colorado. So instead of being paid for the time they worked, miners were paid by the weight in which they extracted. And so they had to bust their asses just to get paid money at all. And if there were any rocks in their load, they would not get paid a dime for the load that they brought.
You know that song, 16 tons of what are you? That is the entire, you got paid by the ton.
Yes. So if there were any rocks, they would not get paid, but the company would still keep the coal. So if they bring in a load of coal and it weighs whatever, and it's got some rocks in it, and they're like, you got rocks in here, buddy, they'd be like, nope, you're not getting paid, but they would still keep the coal that was brought. The CF&I workers lived in company towns, paid rent at company apartments, and shopped at company stores. So they would pay them shit wages. They would go pay rent in their houses that were paid for by CFNI. Sure. All of their money was literally recycled back into CFNI.
Yes, they got paid the money that went back to CFNI.
So the workers, obviously getting frustrated with the working conditions, they start trying to organize a strike, okay? And there's a lot of tension building up between the workers and the mine owners. And so as a kind of gesture of peace, if you want to say that, on April 19th, 1914, the miners celebrated Pascha. I'm sorry if I fucked that up, which is a Greek Orthodox Easter, and they had a feast, they played music, they played baseball, and one of the company militia, because this was a thing, said to one of the union leaders, "Have your fun today, we will have ours tomorrow."
Yikes.
Okay. So on the next morning, while the miners and families were kind of stressing about what was going on, they sent their union leader, who was, his name was Louis Tikas, I believe he was Greek, if I'm not mistaken, to negotiate a truce with CFNI. So he gets there, and he's greeted by the National Guard, okay? They are at the company office, guarding the door to the company offices, so he can't even go inside. They beat him so hard that one of the men breaks his rifle butt on the back of his head.
Jesus.
Okay, so Tikas is like this isn't going well. I'm just gonna leave, right? So he tries to stumble up and leave, and one of the guards instead pulls out a pistol and shoots him in the back of the head and kills him.
Right.
Okay. So
so there was just this year they're dedicating a monument to Tikas, and it's going to be supported by labor unions, of course, but also there's like a National American Hellenic Association that's going to be dedicating it. Hellenic referring to Greek.
Oh, gotcha.
That's how I knew that he was Greek.
There you go. All right. So the guard and the militia working together immediately were like, this is not going to go well. So they turn to the camps, the workers' camps, and they just start firing on them, shooting into the crowd, firing shots into the tents. The miners shot back.
To serve and protect?
Yes. The miners shot back, and a lot of them, they tried to move away from the camp to try to distract fire from the women and children who were like hunkering in the tents. But
they dug a pit, right?
They found kids dead later but anyway. The guard, they mount a machine gun on a nearby hill, and they just start spraying machine gun fire.
It was on like a train car, wasn't it? Like on a hill that they put.
That's later. So
sorry.
First, they mount a machine gun, and then they get. It was called the Death Special. Okay,
right.
Which was a truck that they had equipped with a machine gun, and it was literally called the Death Special. And they would shine bright lights into the crowd, and then fire machine gun fire, so they didn't know what was coming.
But capitalism equals democracy and freedom,
Yeah.
and communism equals suppression and totalitarianism.
On that note, as a result of this terror campaign,
many
many of the miners began to stockpile firearms to try to fight back. They dug shelters, as you were talking about before, and hid with the women and children in there.
For all you liberals, this is the real reason for the Second Amendment or the reason to protect the Second Amendment.
There you go. Because the workers have to have a way to defend themselves.
Yes.
All right. So as they're having this, firefight, there's a lull in action as a train passes between the two sides, the ones on the hill, the ones in the tents. The miners use this opportunity to flee, while the guards closed the gap and moved into the tent cities, setting fire on all of the tent cities. Not everyone made it out, and so 10 miners were killed, as well as 11 children and 3 women, which were the ones that were burned under the...
Right. There was a tent over the pit, and when the National Guard snuck in and put a fucking torch to the tent, it collapsed in on the people who were in the pit.
So
either get in front of our troops or get behind them.
So bear in mind, Wilson has done nothing up to this point. The strikers are furious, and Wilson was aware of this. This has been boiling up for months. And so after their entire tent city has been destroyed. Everything's gone to shit. So seeking retaliation, they launched a 10-day war against the CFNI and its lackeys. They attacked company towns and mines. They drive scabs out and the National Guard out, which they saw, of course, as self-defense. But they started going into mines all around Colorado and being like, nope, this is the workers' mines. These are the workers' mines. So they start collectivizing mines. And this is the point which Woodrow Wilson is like, had enough of that. So he sends the U.S. Army in to shut it down and returns all of the property back to CF&I.
Yeah, they called this the Rocky Mountain Revolution.
Yes,
and it spread to like Cripple Creek,
Yep.
And all over Colorado,
So-
Wyoming as well to some degree. So on the matter of Carnegie, I think it's probably important to note that he was a self-made man. Like, he was somebody who came in as a Scottish immigrant as a child off the boat, was adopted by this wealthy capitalist as like, I think you've got the moxie that I'm looking for.
The bootstraps.
And he did. He pulled himself up by his bootstraps and made himself wealthy, and then spent the rest of his fucking life oppressing working class people, which is why the narrative of the self-made man is utterly bullshit. Even if you are of the disposition and the correct race and, whatever background to make yourself rich from poverty, which Carnegie did. He was
Right.
poor.
Sure.
Made himself wealthy. The idea that you then deserve everything you get is garbage, because Carnegie, as you have demonstrated through this entire podcast, then used his economic power to murder people.
All the power that he was given through the workers that he's murdering.
Right. Anyway, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Eugene Debs, who is one of the more important American socialist leaders. He got his start in industrial unions back in the 19th century, the late 1800s. He kind of gained fame, I suppose, through the Pullman strike in 1894. The Pullman strike was widespread throughout the United States. Eugene Debs was a leader within that strike, and he was arrested for it, charged with, conspiracy.
How big was the strike?
Massive. I mean, absolutely gigantic, because this was the point at which industrial unions were still legal. They were made illegal through a series of legislative decisions and court decisions, and trade unions became more popular. And the difference is basically industrial unions say, okay, we all belong to the railroad. We are employees of the railroad. So we, as a group, all the way from porters to engineers to stewards, whatever, we all go on strike together because we all work in the railroad. It was made illegal to form industrial unions, and you had to form trade unions. And trade unions were position specific. So if you were an engineer, you had to be in an engineers union. And if you were a porter, you had to be in a porters union.
The censorship of unions.
Kind of, yeah. That was sort of the whole point, was to break it up and divide people as much as possible.
That doesn't happen at all now.
Never.
People aren't divided at all.
No. So anyway, so Eugene Debs was a leader in the Pullman strike. He got arrested, went to prison for 6 months, I believe it was. And obviously he had been a radical to some degree, as he was willing to put himself in prison for the sake of the working class. But he became a socialist in prison. He was further radicalized in prison, which follows a long tradition of people becoming radicalized in prison, from Joseph Stalin to Malcolm X to Immortal Technique. I mean, like, a lot of people are Fidel Castro.
By the way, y'all better send me books on my dumb ass.
People get radicalized in prison because they go, okay, well, I didn't actually do anything morally or fundamentally wrong, and yet here I am. Why? And so you begin to look into political theory and economic theory, and you figure out that capitalism is absolute fucking garbage. Anyway, so Debs comes out a socialist, and he helps to found 2 different socialist parties before he finally helps to found the Socialist Party of America, which continued from the early 1900s all the way until its very, very sad decline in the late 70s. Out of its death emerged the Grave Worms, which became the DSA. And then in 1980, the Socialist Party USA was like the corpse of the Socialist Party of America. Okay, but not the same as it was. So in any case, Debs ran for president. He was one of the more popular candidates within the Socialist Party of America, but also in the United States at large. In 1912, he got 6% of the vote, which was the highest that any third-party candidate got for a long time. I think Theodore Roosevelt with a Bull Moose Party got more. After that, Ralph Nader got not even
it would
6.
be Ross Perot would be the next
Ross
one.
Perot.
He got like 19% or something
Yeah.
absurd.
Yeah, so of third-party candidates, Debs in 1912 got 6%, which is substantial, especially for a socialist candidate. Anyway, I've got this book here that I purchased from Hooked on Books, a sponsor of this podcast. I'm kidding. They have nothing to do with this.
But they should. Hooked on Books if you want to associate with us.
Great Issues and International Leaders, and it was composed in 1908, and it includes the Socialist Party of America, and it has pages, which I'm going to go ahead and flip to their platform. It's difficult to stress how different the democratic socialists of the early 20th century are from, say, the DSA, because the DSA tends to try to operate within, of course, the Democratic Party, which is utter and complete garbage, and I don't know why you want to support a capitalist party that is the, graveyard of social justice movements of the last 100 goddamn years. So anyway, in 1908, this was their stance on the subject of alcohol prohibition. It was not made illegal until 1920.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was 1919 or 1920.
Yeah, I think it was passed in 1919 and then put into place in 1920. But had been an issue since the late 19th century. Prohibition had been argued for a long time, and it was a big fucking deal.
It was ravaging the working class. It was
Right.
terrible. Yeah.
So this was their stance on alcohol and its prohibition. We recognize the evils that arise from the manufacture and sale of alcohol and adulterated liquors, and we declare that any excessive use of such liquors by the working class postpones the day of final triumph of our cause. But we hold that these evils cannot be cured by an extension of the police power of the capitalist state. Alcoholism is a disease and can best be remedied by doing away with the underfeeding, overwork, and overworry which result from the capitalist system. And as we are all drunk tonight, perhaps this is mildly hypocritical, but that is probably the best fucking line on that subject I've ever heard. However, this very much echoes the Democratic Party's New Deal, minus anything that fundamentally changes the economy. The immediate government relief for the unemployed workers by building schools, reforesting cutover and wastelands, reclamation of arid tracts, and the building of canals, and by extending all other useful public works. So public work projects, of course, were huge in the New Deal. Raised employment throughout the country, the building of roads and canals, and if you go out east here in Colorado Springs, they have these kind of berms or whatever that are meant to decrease wind, because in eastern Colorado, wind is brutal. However, the Socialist Party of America demanded prevailing union wages for these people, which, of course, the Democratic Party did not. So here's the thing that they did not continue into the New Deal. Collective ownership of railroads, telegraphs, telephones, steamship lines, and all other means of social transportation. Extension of public domain to include mines, quarries, oil wells, forests, and water power. Not the Democratic Party. Occupancy and use of land to be the sole title of possession. In other words, no absentee landlordism. Absolute freedom of the press, speech, and assemblage. Anyway, so they also talk about the establishment of unemployment insurance, disability insurance, Social Security, again in 1908. That's the Socialist Party of America, of which Eugene Debs was a part. So the Alien and Sedition Acts are something that were passed in 1798 under the presidency of John Adams, and his entire purpose was to prevent the Federalists under Thomas Jefferson from being elected. Of course, Thomas Jefferson Woo! Thomas Jefferson was elected to the presidency, and he repealed a lot of the factors, a lot of the tenets or whatever of the Alien and Sedition Acts, but not all of them. In 1918, they were extended and codified. And under the Alien and Sedition Acts, of course, this is during World War I, the U.S. is involved in a war in Europe, and it became illegal to speak out against recruitment, the war effort, the federal government in general. And Eugene Debs does all of this.
Just quick side note, like that didn't happen at all with the Vietnam War. Like nobody was arrested for speaking out against the war or for burning their draft cards.
Oh, the Alien and Sedition Acts were used during World War II to justify the Japanese internment camps.
Right. I'm being entirely sarcastic.
I know, but
a lot of people arrested for those things.
But the point is, we had concentration camps here in the United States in World War II. We seized...
We had one in Colorado.
Yes, we did.
Executive Order 9066, I believe.
I think that's right. We seized property from Japanese American citizens and turned it over to white people.
Yes, and those Japanese Americans lost their homes, they lost their businesses. The lucky few had friends who, or indirect family members who were able to maintain those businesses or those homes, but the majority of them came back after the war and found that their homes had been sold to other families, or their businesses were now different businesses. So yes, so now they were homeless and starving and fucked.
Right, and all of this has to do with the Alien and Sedition Act.
Yes, and also I want to say the FBI never found in all of their searching, never found a single case of Japanese American espionage.
It's just that one bad apple, y'all.
So, anyway, back to Eugene Debs. So he was arrested for giving a speech against the First World War, against the United States involvement in the First World War. And then he ran for...
This is like, so the left gets a little like murky, kind of Menshevik in World War I, doesn't it? Though
It does. A lot, and I mean a lot of American leftists side with the United States during
wartime in general.
World War I. Yes, yeah, that was true of socialists throughout the world. In fact, Murray Rothbard, Shitty McShitterson, the fucking ANCAP general secretary, criticizes a lot of the left throughout the world because they do claim to be internationalist, and then when war breaks out, side with their particular country, which is a valid fucking criticism. I will critical support for Murray Rothbard.
No,
he was correct in that line that leftists who pretend to be internationalist and then side with their own country when it comes to. And we see it today. People who are like North Korea, Venezuela, like
Iran,
American,
fucking
Syria. America's garbage. Well, except for the American press when it speaks the truth about Venezuela and North Korea. If you truly are an internationalist and you truly believe that the United States is an imperialist power, why in God's name or Darwin's name, if you're some sort of weird like fucking Hitchens nerd, whatever, why would you possibly believe what the United States press prints? Holy fucking God and holy fucking Darwin. Why? There is zero chance that it's going to be honest from any reasonable perspective. But anyway, let's cycle back again.